I can teach you how to bewitch the mind and ensnare the senses. I can tell you how to bottle fame, brew glory, and even put a stopper in death.
Welcome to Snape Chat, the voice of the Snape Dome, the podcast where we discuss all things Snape, always. Join us as we dive into the world of the bravest man we ever knew, in art, fanfic, meta, and more. Obviously, this is Snapecentric with episode 34. The topic for this supersized program is Snape and Lupin, or Snupin. I am joined by artist SafePlaceSnupin, authors Nocturn, Gertrude Crow, and regulars Megs and Masao for an amazing discussion. Enjoy the show. This is Snapecentric. Returning with us are Nocturn.
Hi there.
Masao.
Hello.
And Megs.
Hello.
And we have some new guests here. Gertrude Crow.
Hiya.
And SafePlaceSnupin.
Hello.
Glad to have everyone here. We're going to talk about Snape and Lupin, also known as Snupin. Okay, why don't we go ahead and talk about why people like Lupin. Go ahead with SafePlaceSnupin.
Sure, yeah. So, ever since I was a kid, I really was drawn to Lupin, and he was the one who, introduced me to the Snupin pairing. But mostly what I liked about him as a kid was that he just was kind of like a soft character that I really related to because he was, a quieter kind of. And then as I got older, I realized he has a lot more going on than just that. And I think that he's a really compelling character for that. He's he has a lot of hidden qualities that, some good, some bad, but I think that's what makes him interesting.
And Gertrude?
Well, I kind of, in opposition to that, I kind of had a bit of a up and down relationship with Remus Lupin. I liked him when I first encountered him, and then having, read the entire series and going back, I decided I really didn't like him for a while. Because primarily, I'm a Snape fan, and they have a bit of a difficult relationship at times, and some of those sort of less cuddly parts of Remus. Yeah, I kind of really didn't like him for a while, and then I came back around to him in the end and started to enjoy him as that complex character.
Hey, and Nocturne?
Yeah, I kind of agree with actually both of you. I really liked him at first when I read the series when I was a kid. And then coming back around as an adult, I started to see all of the ways that he really isn't necessarily an entirely good person. He makes some questionable decisions. And I really love morally great characters. And I would put him in that category, kind of depending on how you want to go. He doesn't always act in the best interest of the students at the castle in book 3. He's got some secrets. And I really like that aspect of him because he's very unassuming and kind of flies under the radar. And especially when you're reading from the perspective of Harry, who's a child who kind of looks up to him, he kind of brushes those things aside and you don't always really see all of the questionable decisions he's made. So I kind of like coming back to that and finding all those places where he does have some character flaws, and it's kind of fun to explore those.
Yeah, definitely.
Masao?
So I started reading the books at 19, and a fair few had already come out by that time. So I think I read the first 4 in pretty rapid succession, within a week or two. And right from the bat, I loved Snape. He was my favorite character. And when Remus comes in and they have this, I don't know, kind of acrimonious energy, it immediately felt like, oh, there's romantic tension. There's history here. They're like bitter exes, or there's unresolved tension or something like that. So where I was in my mind, I loved that. And then as Lupin gets more kind of, problematic and complex, I just got really intrigued. They just, they seem like such a together, kind of problematic couple in a way, and I love it.
All right. And Megs?
So the difference between starting at 19 versus when you're 11. But so I was definitely among the, like, a lot of people will say that Prisoner of Azkaban is their favorite book. That's probably the highest probability for a lot of people. And it definitely used to be for a long time. It was definitely one of my favorites. The fact that we finally got a defense teacher that appeared to be competent was like, a big thing. And I loved him from the aspect of being someone who we find another person from Harry's past that we don't know anything about. And yet, why is he coming forward now is just really interesting how, like, where had he been all that time? It's just fun to speculate, like, where did he come from? What has he been doing? Because he was obviously like in, ratty clothes and stuff like that. And just the life that he led, especially once we discover he's a werewolf. And so I love him kind of in the same way that I love Severus or other, I guess, characters that came from childhood trauma. So it's like that's where it's easy for me to get into Snupin from that aspect of thinking of two flawed, broken people for different reasons from different backgrounds that can kind of see the trauma and scars in one another that, can either be there for each other or things like that. But I definitely do really like Remus. Of course, we can get into how the whole time, even though he maybe wasn't a part of the, like bullying of Severus directly, he was a prefect and didn't stop anything from happening. So it's like, okay, dude, like, so, but he's still one of my favorite characters for sure.
Okay. The next thing I want to talk about are some of Snape and Lupin's interactions in canon. First, I'd like to talk about Lupin's place in the Marauders, which was the group of James, Sirius, Peter, and Lupin.
Yeah, I think that's quite an interesting dynamic, that whole group. And sort of at first, you're sort of through Harry introduced to that group as being like, oh, his dad and his dad's friends, and they're all fun, and isn't it great? And then gradually you see a different side to that friendship. And personally, I kind of see the Marauders group as like almost quite a toxic friendship group in terms of, sort of egging each other on. There's an aspect of it that's just like fun and joking and pranks and getting up to fun stuff that teenagers do at boarding school. But there's like a darker side to that as well, where they're bullying other students and things like that, and are also not always that nice to each other.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I think with Remus, he's sort of really keen and eager to make friends and to be accepted, having kind of, I'm not sure if this is canon or fanon, but there's this sort of idea that when he was a kid, he didn't really interact with other children very much. And I think it's canon that he nearly didn't go to Hogwarts.
Mm-hmm.
So for him to sort of meet these people and to be accepted, I feel like there's a kind of, he has an attachment to them that perhaps isn't 100% healthy.
Mm-hmm.
I totally agree with that. And when I'm like reading Snupin, or if I'm like thinking about writing, which I should do more of, and caveat, I actually really like Wolfstar as a ship. Like I'll read it, especially as like a side ship in Snary. So like I'm definitely not trying to be like, well, this ship is better than just this ship. But when I'm reading Snupin, I like the sort of the dynamic of Remus is realizing that his relationship with the Marauders is maybe like toxic and codependent, and like kind of detaching from that as a way to sort of move towards a relationship with Snape where he's treating him better. Like that's really like a kind of a story dynamic that I really enjoy.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And also, even if it's like not necessarily canon, I think that it is a little more like true to life because
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think it's very rare to go through your entire life with like the exact same friends you had when you were 10. So to see like, to see like Remus and other characters as well, of course, kind of like develop better and really like grow as characters. I think that's a nice niche for Snupin because it does tend to gear towards more like character development that way.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I also think that Snupin kind of exposes how much of a transactional component there is to Remus's friendship with the Marauders. Just that, they may view the friendship differently. Like for James and Sirius, it may just be that, yeah, that's our friend. We help him out on full moons, whatever. But for Remus, it's definitely a lot more high risk and high stakes. Like he can't risk the friendship because if anything comes out about him being a werewolf, then that's kind of the end of the line for him. So there's just more of a feeling of obligation there. So it's kind of nice to see with Snupin that he has the ability to have some agency in choosing his relationship on the side with Snape, which is just kind of a nice shift in dynamic. And yeah, I also read Wolfstar, and that was my first ship that got me into fan fiction. So
Oh, wow.
definitely no shade to that ship.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, and like as a Snary fan, especially in the early days of Snary, like Wolfstar was almost a given. And like I have no hate towards that ship and all respect to Wolfstar shippers.
Okay, so yeah, then we get into the prank where Sirius kind of entices Snape to go into the tunnel leading to the Shrieking Shack where Lupin is a transformed werewolf. Yeah, that's kind of I don't know.
Yeah, so that's a big sort of major thing in Snape and Lupin's relationship, as in, in the wider sense. It's a very, very poignant moment in both of their lives, both separately and together. And actually, we're going to talk a little bit, I think, about the fics and tropes and stuff later, but there's not a huge amount of fics that kind of focus on that aspect actually as kind of their main starting point. But it's definitely, it comes into their relationship. It can't not come into their relationship because it's had such a big impact on both of their lives in different ways, obviously, for each of them. But yeah, for Lupin as well, it's really quite a sort of tragic moment. We're just talking about his friendship with the Marauders, and for his or one of his best friends to kind of betray him like that is huge and quite tragic for him. And I don't think that's really explored in canon. Remus seems to just forgive Sirius. Oh, by the way, and he forgave him and they're fine now.
To me, I think of the prank as the perfect tool in like fan fiction and things like that to either prize it, because I haven't read a lot of Snupin, so it's surprising that that's not tied in more, just because I've always been someone who loves taking little nuggets of canon and making that, like manipulating them in a way that gives them a different meaning or point of view or things like that. So it's like I definitely either in like other ships or things like that, because I'll just write around Snape in general. But the idea that Remus is just completely ignorant to the fact that this is happening, and it's kind of like Sirius just got upset about something or just really wanted to get back at Severus for whatever reason. And he wasn't even aware that it was something that was going to happen until afterwards, and either say they were in a relationship beforehand and then, Snape feels betrayed by what happened or something like that. It's really interesting to play around with that sort of stuff. But yeah, so it's easy to kind of figure out a way to be like, oh, well, Lupin didn't know. So versus part of the whole thing. So it's yeah,
that aspect of, I've seen that a few times where Snape can't accept that Lupin didn't know anything about it. And yes, I think you mentioned like they might have been just starting to get together, Snape and Lupin, or and then this happens and it kind of rips them apart again. That's quite an interesting line to follow.
Our boy is filled with trauma. I mean, every little thing is just going to make him go sus. Like, it's just not,
Oh, yeah. Does anybody think that Lupin would have a fear at this point of Snape outing him or, revealing that he's a werewolf?
I would imagine so, yeah.
My sense is that maybe he would kind of feel like he would deserve it. And then when Snape doesn't, he's kind of like feeling even more bad about it. Like that's kind of my vibe.
Yeah, I definitely think that he's kind of got like that mega guilty conscience going on, and that thought of like, oh well, I will deserve it if this happens to me, like, is kind of strong, I think, with Remus as a character. So I definitely would agree with that.
We see it firsthand in the third book, like at the end, like he doesn't fight it when it's like, oh, Snape told everybody, so I guess I'm done, like
yeah.
And I made a note actually about that. So, well, adjacent to that is this, would Lupin, again, I've seen in a couple of fanfics, Lupin trying to go and apologize to Snape after the prank. And how Snape reacts to that, usually not too well, at least at first.
Grovel, Remus, grovel.
Remus is pretty good at a bit of groveling and stuff. So sometimes he can wear him down, you see, and then that can actually be the start of their relationship then.
After rather than before. I like that.
Yes. Because it could also be a turning point for Remus, where he's like, oh, my friends aren't really out for my best interests. Like, we were doing things to try and keep me safe and away from other people, but this is them actually bringing an external someone into his very vulnerable state. So I could see him feeling the betrayal, so that's definitely, okay, I love that. Now I need stories like that.
I think, like, this is fan fiction. There's so many different ways that you can look at it. And I think that, to make a comparison, when people are like, oh, it's a kid's book, you can't say that Harry's abused. Like, I think that with this, there are multiple ways you can look at it. And, especially for the sake of like whatever narrative you're trying to tell with the fan fiction that you're writing. And I think that one is, this is traumatic for Remus. Remus is realizing like that one of his best friends wanted to use him as a murder weapon without his knowledge or consent. And I think that in a way, this can become like a shared trauma that eventually Snape and Remus actually kind of bond over, that they realize that they were both like victimized by this, same, and that could be fun.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I think about that a lot.
When I'm making breakfast, when I'm walking the dog.
Some of you have mentioned Wolfstar, and I'm not really a fan of that, but which doesn't matter. The one thing I was thinking was that the prank seems like it would be a really difficult thing for Lupin and Sirius to overcome.
I think, I can't speak for everybody who likes Wolfstar, but I like Wolfstar because they're toxic and codependent.
Yeah, I do like the stories that address that, where there's a little bit more conflict. I think it's handled well in some things. I haven't read much recently, so I can't name anything specifically, but I do remember there have been a few. And I like that it adds to the dynamic. It creates this conflict that they have to work through, almost kind of similar to Snupin, if it's handled well. I think there's some stories that do it really well.
Absolutely.
Yeah, kind of on that note, like, I think I'm not a Wolfstar fan particularly. And I think it's that sort of level of angst and toxicity, similarly with Snirius or Snack, however you want to call it, that I kind of like it, but also I can't quite handle like the really angsty, high angst stuff. And Snupin, there is some really angsty Snupin, but also there's just that little softness to it as well. I mean, we'll talk about Hurt Comfort and stuff later, but it's not quite as devastating.
I agree.
Most of it.
I agree. Although I will say, as somebody who likes both Snupin and Wolfstar, the three of them together, love that.
Yes.
Yeah, that's fun.
Yes. Give me some snacking all day. Like that's good.
Snacking.
Yeah.
That's the best.
It's a great name as well, yeah.
Snacking. Okay, next in their timeline is Snape's worst memory, where I can't remember, is it James or Sirius? Well, they both kind of attack him, and he ends up upside down.
Yeah, I think it's sort of mostly James that.
Yeah, it's when Snape fights, like kind of starts fighting back or says something, and then that's when what is it? Then Sirius retaliates, I think, because he says something back.
I think it starts because like they're bored after their exam,
Yeah.
and James sort of either to show off or like is just wants to have some fun with Sirius or whatever. He's like, oh look, there's Snape. Let's go and hassle him. That'll be fun.
And Remus, in the meantime, is I don't know what the word is.
He's sort of hanging back a little bit, isn't he?
Yeah.
Right.
Like usually like on the sidelines, or like not like exactly in the picture but still there.
He doesn't want to participate, but he doesn't want to stop it either.
Yeah.
Or he doesn't have like the courage to stop it, at least.
Yeah, like similarly to everything we were saying earlier, really about their relationship. But I do wonder, like, is he like that because it's after the prank, and before then maybe he got more involved? We'll never know canonically.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that also gives a lot of room for, when you're writing, you can endless possibilities.
Yeah, I don't know, because he actually has the authority to stop it. But he's so busy reading his book and pretending not to notice.
Pretending
it's so
not
good.
to notice.
It's just so good.
Remus is kind of very good at sort of hiding from things, and I think that's one of the things that I love and hate about him, because I think I relate to it a little bit. Like, it's easier just to not get involved and to not stand up, isn't it?
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And also, I think, obviously this is just like speculation, but like it could also have to do with, like a little bit of feeling like he owes the other Marauders for like, accepting him when they found out what he was. And I think he probably has like a very intense fear that like nobody else would do that for him. So he kind of just like, well, this is kind of my lot in life and I don't like it when they do that, but I'm not going to say anything because like this is what it is.
Yeah.
When you share a dorm room with these guys, like think of it like if anything were to go wrong, how awful that would be throughout your Hogwarts career of literally not being like sharing proximity with, people that you were used to be friends with, and then things went wrong. So there's definitely a lot of factors at play there.
Well, and the most sinister like possibility is Remus thinking like, well, if I do anything to impede them, they could destroy my life.
Yeah.
I don't remember what fic I read that was literally that, where like James and Sirius are portrayed as like these guys who are like, if you don't do this with us and like hurt Snape, then we'll tell everybody what you are and like totally ruin you. Like that was a very interesting like setup. I don't think it necessarily is rooted in a lot of canon, but like it was really good. I wish I could remember the name of that one.
I mean, that's certainly like one reading of it. Obviously, we don't know a huge amount about the Marauders era. So yeah, I can see you could justify, that theory.
Yeah.
Just by the fact that they are that kind of the popular bullies sort of thing. Yeah, I can see that being believable.
And I think that's the joy of fan fiction. It's just like even if that wasn't your theory, if that's just like a dynamic that you think is fun to explore, you can do it.
For sure. Yeah.
Fast forward to the 90s. Yeah. Who knows if they had any interactions in between. But 1993, and Snape and Lupin are at the head table, with Snape looking at Lupin with loathing.
And maybe a little bit of longing.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. I mean, as we often say in the Snape fandom, it's Harry's interpretation, isn't it, that we're reading?
Yep.
So somebody else might see that look as something very different.
He didn't call me back.
Right.
How dare he sit there and pretend like we had nothing?
Exactly.
We don't know what happened in the 80s. Exactly.
Right.
Yeah, that's a really, really fun thing to play around with, I think.
Okay, I know this is like, we don't know what happened in the 80s and we're trying to move on to the 90s here, but like, at the end of everything, like these two characters have both lost like literally their whole lives. And I feel like that's such a good reason for them to like at least start to kind of like try and find each other's company there, So, but I will not go into that rabbit hole because I could talk about that for forever. So
No,
I know.
I'm with you there.
There's a couple of fics that sort of explore that, aren't there? I can't remember the names of any of them.
There's even one where Remus and Snape get together and sort of kidnap / adopt Harry.
Oh yeah, there's definitely a few of those
plans.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, regardless
the
of time period, whether it's in the 80s or 90s, Snupin adopting Harry, perfect dynamic. Love it.
Okay,
absolutely. That's kind of what got me into Snupin, actually. I came from the Severitis side of things and then came across, I think probably like That Awful Boy and and then started to get into other Snupin things. But yeah, it's kind of a match made in heaven.
I mean, like Harry getting parents and like his dad is Remus and his mom is Snape.
And they have that mum and dad kind of dynamic. Like I always sort of say Snape's a little bit like Molly, which might sound a bit weird.
Yeah.
You were right. You're correct.
No, I love it.
Yeah. I've never thought about that, but absolutely.
And then Remus is a little bit like Arthur, as in he's like that kind of dad who's like wants to be friends with the kids and will let them get away with stuff.
You're so right. You're so correct.
Yeah,
I remember like I was doing a thing where I was like drawing some of the like screen caps from the movies. It was really fun. It was the scene where in Prisoner of Azkaban where Harry kind of stumbles into this weird tension between Remus and Snape in the middle of the night. And like I think I titled it like when I posted it, was like, oh, it's like when you walk in on your parents having an argument or whatever, and like I guess that resonated with people, but that's the energy.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
definitely.
Now I'm just picturing Snape having told Harry he can't call him mom at school, but then accidentally does.
Yes.
Good.
There's actually a fun little cartoon I came across, not quite the same as that, but it's where Snape and Lupin are in a class, I think, and teaching together, and Snape accidentally calls Remus daddy.
Yes.
And he hides under the table. He's just like, I live here.
That's brilliant.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Is that one of yours, SafePlaceSnupin?
No.
No, okay.
No, I think I did link it in the Google Doc.
Yes. I know I just saw it like last night.
Like that one's funny, but it also like it unlocked something in my brain. Just the thought of like Snape casually calling Remus daddy. Ooh, that's good.
Okay, you have to write a fic on that now.
Yes.
It's your challenge.
Yeah.
And then the next is a big scene where there's a boggart and Lupin kind of talks Neville on how to deal with it by picturing, they determine that Snape is his boggart, at least at that time. And he's like, oh, picture him in your granny's clothes. And he will be forced into this dress and everything. It's kind of, I don't know, it's really passive aggressive.
That's exactly how I sort of that was one of the things, like I said earlier, that on rereading, when you know sort of the full story, you come back and you go, oh, actually, that's not quite as fun as it seemed the first time around.
Right.
Yes,
That's
for
very
sure.
passive aggressive and undermining of your
Mhm.
colleague who you've only just started this job like a couple of weeks ago and you're already humiliating your colleague like that.
Right.
Right.
And he's making your potions, so
Yeah, yeah. I
Yeah.
like to think Snape pulled it off, though. I think he probably looked great.
Oh
really.
yeah.
Hell yeah.
Oh
For
yeah.
sure.
And then that's
Maybe okay.
sorry.
Sorry. So maybe they are together.
Yeah,
And
they're
it's
already
something that
together.
He's
It's already
like
happened.
it's like Lupin's into it.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
he loves when they do the cross-dressing thing or role playing. And so for him, he's like, you know what would be funny to kids? But something that I'm really gonna have fun with in a different way. How about we do that?
I like it when you're angry at me. Here we go.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh.
Yeah, there's that as
Remus
well.
Remus has a kink for getting yelled at, obviously.
Right.
Definitely.
Meanwhile, Snape is literally waiting in his office with the like cup of wolfsbane, just like waiting for him to be done impatiently, looks out there and he's like, oh my God, he did not just do that.
I did. So I made a joke of that in a completely different fic, like a Snape OC fic. But just so Snape's partner says to Remus like, "Oh, well, if you wanted to see my husband in a skirt, you only needed to ask."
I love that.
There was actually a doujin artist, Omega 2D, who made like a lot of Harry Potter doujin, I think like in the early like 2000s. And I'm pretty sure I have it, so I'll check after this. But the boggart scene, like Remus actually convinces Neville to like imagine him in lingerie instead.
Amazing.
Oh, brilliant.
Amazing.
Yeah, let's see that.
There is actually a fan fiction story where it becomes like this sort of bratty gesture and there's some like BDSM dynamics going on. And then later Snape gets him back. I'll have to link it later, but I think it was handled really well. And yeah, it was one of those situations where they were sort of just starting to get together and Snape sort of like tried to ghost Remus and then he sort of pulled this off as just sort of like a plea for attention and then Snape gets him back. So
Oh.
I
Sounds
definitely
nice.
enjoyed that. And it definitely
Yeah, that
Love
sounds
that.
good.
right. Where yeah, I think it's just like a sort of like people have said a passive aggressive way to pick a fight.
Mm.
Yeah.
and I like that.
And then, yes, also at the same time, Snape is brewing Lupin's wolfbane.
Mhm.
And we do have a scene of him taking it to him, and Snape seems like he will not turn his back on Lupin.
Until he takes it.
Is it until he takes it, or is
Oh, he won't. I see what you're saying. He won't, like, he doesn't trust him, so he won't turn his back on him. Yeah.
yeah? I guess it could be read either way, though. Really.
Yeah, there's again different interpretations of that scene.
I feel like that's basically just fodder for like power dynamics in fic.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
But yeah, from a more serious standpoint, I think you can explain it by just the fact that he was almost attacked with the prank. And so he has some residual trauma. I think that's probably a good motivation for him to continue brewing it, just to ensure that nothing like that happens again. I think Snape feels probably some level of responsibility, especially knowing that he has the ability to make this potion. And so, and he's the only one that can do it.
Right. I was saying one of my favorite headcanons, because he didn't invent wolfsbane, like some other person did, but like I like to believe that, especially during that year, that out of kind of like a trauma-based response, that Snape kind of perfected or improved the wolfsbane potions or the potion, because like, oh, I have to live with this person who I had this traumatic experience with. I'm going to focus that energy into obsessively improving this potion so I can sort of protect myself.
Because he'll find flaws in everything.
Right.
So
He didn't
Yeah.
make it, so there's obviously room for improvement.
exactly.
Right.
Mhm.
Yeah, that definitely that professional can't think of the word, but yeah, he will do everything to perfection, even if it wasn't like personally important to him. Yeah,
like a compulsion, just to be like, he just has to.
He has to do it the best.
Okay, and then later on, they end up back at the Shrieking Shack with a standoff with Sirius.
It just makes me think of the gif with the 3 Spider-Men, where everyone's like pointing at each other and it's just like wands going around in different directions, like you, no, you, no, you.
Yes.
Yeah, bit of a Mexican standoff.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's it. I mean, just as Snape on his own, you know, again in the Snape fandom, we talk a lot about how traumatic that moment must be for him and how triggering.
Yes.
And hence, you know, he really does, we see him really kind of lose it, particularly in the books. He kind of, yeah, pretty much has a mental breakdown.
I think this moment, as well as like the pensive moment, like I feel like you can really see that Snape's trauma is being triggered, and like he's kind of losing control out of a sense of panic.
Right.
It's so interesting. He's probably bringing energy from the prank into it, and his loathing for Sirius, and
well, and if this is a fic or whatever, and Remus and Snape have kind of been starting a relationship, like this could be a point of either major betrayal, or Sirius shows up and now this is where Snape sees like, well, where is his loyalty now? Is it with me or is it with him?
I was just gonna say that because I was thinking like maybe it was a point in time where obviously like they're working together and Remus is trying really hard to make amends, and Severus begrudgingly starts to fall for his charms and things like that. But then there's something in the back of his mind, of course, which, with everything going on with Sirius's appearances and attacks in the castle and blah, 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 and all that stuff, that he's like probably always asking him, he's like, are you sure you don't know anything? And he's like, no, like genuinely, I have no idea what's going on. But he's going to constantly question it because he can't believe that he's actually more important than him protecting his friend. Like that's part of the trauma talking. So when he quote unquote catches him in the act, like one does, immediately it just like erases all progress that was made.
Yeah.
Which is great for angst and fic and stuff like that. And I love it. So then, but now I need to see how it gets fixed and make it back together.
It's almost like he walks in on him cheating.
Yes, exactly. It's like,
I love
right. I mean, it's like emotional infidelity in a different way of like him obviously having more, even if it's just like brotherly love for Sirius, and Sirius is someone who, it's fun. It's fun. I know that Snapecentric is like not about the Marauders, but I have so much fun with Snape in there, like a tossed salad. It is so great.
I'm right there with you.
Masao and I are just like, hell yeah, just like raining Marauders.
There's a really dramatic part of a fic that focuses on that moment. I think it's in You Will Not Kiss Me, but my memory's not great. I might have confused that. I think it's in that fic where Snape literally does have a mental break. Like, I think there's been some other stuff going on with like his memory's been manipulated and stuff like that, but it gets to that point and he literally sort of has a mental break, and I think he becomes quite violent, sort of even more so than in canon, and I think then he sort of like passes out or something and has almost like a brain injury afterwards. So that's quite interesting, that one.
Mind break. Mind break.
Yeah, mind break.
Well, yeah, I mean, so like there's the like whole serious aspect of it, right? And like, whose side is he on? But also like later when they're like outside of the Shrieking Shack and, Lupin is turning into a werewolf, I feel like that kind of adds like a different dimension of trauma for Snape because like he's confronting the monster again, like for a second time. And I feel like that's like a totally different type of trauma too. So he kind of gets like double whammied there. Like yeah,
it's like the whole year has been, he's been perhaps trying to sort of talk himself out of like, oh, history's not repeating itself, like trying to not be traumatized. And then it is like history repeating itself at the end there for him.
And now Snape has to like make sure children don't get killed on top of everything else.
Right. Poor fucking guy.
Yes.
Oh, sorry.
That's all right.
For an explicit podcast. We're fucking.
I mean, poor Snape that like Harry is constantly trying to die. And Snape is just like, come on.
Yeah, I love that sort of trope of like Snape just being so done with Harry. Like, God damn it, can you not just keep yourself alive?
Okay. And then we fast forward to Order of the Phoenix. I don't believe that they have a scene where they interact. However, it's being as they're both in the order and they're at 12 Grimald Place, they must have interacted.
I think this is like a moment either, you know, in fan fiction for them to like have another chance to get together, or like they have been together and they've been keeping it under wraps, and now it's like, well, we have to interact in front of people and they're gonna notice.
Quite a fun one.
I'm just trying to think if there was something more I wanted to say about this. I know I've read some where they've kind of been standing at the back of order meetings next to each other and pretending not to interact.
Yeah, I've definitely read some fics like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
They sort of looks across the table and then hanging about afterwards.
One of them sneaks to the other's like room. They're staying overnight.
Sirius loses his shit.
Yeah.
Yeah. How Sirius deals with their relationship in that context is endlessly amusing.
So the reason that Severus is always picking on Sirius and not being able to help and go out any or whatever is because Remus and Sirius have a history. So of course he's got to give the ex-boyfriend a hard time.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly. I feel like there was a fic that I read from this, and I wish this is one of these like lost fics where I'm just like, it was so compelling to me and I can't find it, where Sirius and Remus were in like this really toxic relationship, like this weird dynamic that I was all for, where Sirius is actually heterosexual, but he wants that control over Remus, who he knows is attracted to him. So he'll like make out with him and do a little bit of foreplay, but won't actually give him that satisfaction. And then here's Snape, who's gay, who can give him everything that he wants.
Like he is, yeah.
And like offers him like, you can marry me and I'll give you a child.
Wow.
Like he does, you know?
And so he's trying to seduce Remus away from Sirius, and Remus feels like, I want this, but what, like Snape, really? Like, I'm sure he's got nefarious purposes, but what he realizes is that the relationship with Snape and Snape's intentions are way healthier.
I feel like I might have read that, but yeah, I'll see if I can find it.
Oh,
Yeah,
tag team, find the fic, find the fic.
It's one of those things that like lives in my head, and like I feel like,
off
man,
to Reddit. Let's go.
I wish I had thought of that idea, because I love the idea of like Sirius keeping him in this relationship even though he's not interested in him, and Snape being here like, I can give you what you want, and like actually it being very like good and wholesome for him.
Yeah, it's quite interesting to see how, I think we kind of mentioned it earlier as well, how Snape can actually be a healthier option for Remus.
Yeah.
When you don't usually think of Snape in that light.
Yeah, Snape is the domestic goddess that Remus wants.
That's good. Megs, you just mentioned going to Reddit. Is that a good way to look up fics?
Oh, yes. So there's various Reddits as far as like for finding fic, be that like fanfic ones, but then there's also, I'll have to look up different ones. But Reddit is usually really good, especially if you're trying to find some obscure things, because just those random people will just be like, oh yeah, I think I kind of know or whatever. And it's like, it's a good way to reach more people than just, who you interact with, maybe in Discord or things like that. And it, who knows, it might be 6 months from now, but then all of a sudden you'll have the fix. So
Good to know, because I know there's like a 70s school age Snupin that was really, really good, but it was being posted on fanfiction.net right around the time that everything got purged.
Yeah.
So.
Oh.
Yeah, that's the hard thing too. I mean, obviously, thank goodness for Archive of Our Own now, trying to find and absorb works from various smaller pages, but way back when there were so many just self-hosted small little places, who knows where we read whatever and whether it still exists out there. I mean, it's just crazy.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've just lost, I've forgotten the author's name now, but like there was a massive Snupin author who just recently removed all of their fics.
Oh yes, Snagachira.
Yes.
Yeah. They had some great fics.
Yeah, really.
Yeah,
really
that's what I've heard. And then the next time we see them is at the Battle of the Seven Potters from Deathly Hallows.
Yeah, I just added that in there. It's obviously it's a very short moment, but
it's
obviously Snape, we find out right at the end that Snape was trying to save Remus from a Death Eater who was aiming at him. And Dumbledore was not very happy, apparently, with Snape because he could have blown his cover by doing that.
Yeah.
You can read it as Snape being Snape and wanting to save as many people as he can, but it's also quite a good one to play into the Snupin stuff and all that secret relationship stuff,
Mm-hmm. Yes, why does he risk blowing his cover?
Because he's in love with Remus, obviously.
I love that.
People do dumb stuff for love,
He's so in love, he's going to put his life on the line.
the most canon of Snupin moments right here.
Yes. Well, and I love that. I love that whenever they get together, there's going to come the inevitable point where this becomes a matter of life and death for Severus because of his, spying business.
Yeah, and for both of them, there's a couple of fics where maybe they're both off spying or one or the other gets injured in their line of work and the other rescues them. Yeah, there's some really good ones like that.
Okay, so we've talked about things around the canon interactions. Now I want to go to similarities and differences. They do have some similarities in their backgrounds.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we don't really know. I think it's kind of fanon, isn't it, that Remus has a poor upbringing? I'm not sure about that, but
yeah,
they definitely both have childhood trauma.
Yeah, like I think Remus's father actually worked for the Ministry, tracking down sort of, not just like people like werewolves, but anyone who, the Ministry considers like a dark creature or something like that.
Yeah.
Right.
Something that would actually put him at odds with his son becoming a werewolf. You would think that would be explored a little bit more. I was actually really surprised to find that out when I was trying to write a Snupin fic for an AU challenge. I don't think I knew that before looking that up.
Yeah, it's kind of like why Greyback attacks and turns Remus is because Lyle, I don't know if Lyle actually arrested him, but he argued for Greyback being kept in the Ministry prison or whatever to face trial, but he was released, and then he was so mad at Lyle Lupin he came and bit his son.
Right, yeah, exactly.
Wasn't it canon that Lyle called werewolves soulless creatures or something
I think so.
like that? Which is what got Greyback so mad at him. Yeah.
Yeah, so you'd think that there must be some kind of difficult relationship between Remus and his father, even if he does afterwards kind of change his opinion of werewolves because his son is one, but there's definitely going to be some difficulties there.
Well, and this is something that I wish we had more of, is like, I understand there's a war going on and everything like that, but it seems like everybody from that generation either doesn't have parents, or we're just like not acknowledging that they have parents. Like,
Or
I would
they
love to go
died.
into, or they died, but like, okay, I want to point out that on the Harry Potter wiki, at least, that when it comes to Lily's parents, it says that they died of normal muggle causes or whatever. And like, this happened before she was like 20.
Yeah.
What happened?
Normal causes is, yeah.
I think probably the author just couldn't be bothered to really write
Yeah.
the backstories.
I mean, if your parents die when you're like 19 or 20, both of them, that's going to be kind of traumatic. I would love to know what happened.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah, especially if you're like in hiding and just found out you're pregnant and you're like 20 years old. Yeah.
Exactly. But I would love to know if Remus's parents are around as he's an adult. I would love to know like what they think of how he's living his life, because he's not getting support from them, obviously. If that's, whether that's because he feels like he's disappointed them and he won't take support from them, or they've like disowned him. I do feel like that's a point of like having something in common with Snape, where he also doesn't have any kind of family support.
Yeah.
And well, they're both intelligent. That's kind of an inference, I think. It's not definitely stated for Lupin.
Yeah.
For Snape, we know from his textbook that he's pretty brilliant.
Right.
I feel like the impression that like Remus is the nerd of the Marauders, like whether that's canon or not, I get that vibe. It's
very strong fanon, isn't it? It's kind of one of those things that everyone sort of collectively agreed on.
Well, and with a lot of Snupin, like teen Snupin, they're always like meeting in the library to study with each other. The other Marauders don't study or whatever.
I also have a headcanon that Remus just has to be resourceful, just more out of necessity than anything else. I mean, he can't be in one place of employment for longer than a couple of months before people start to suspect things. So he's always moving around and having to pick up new skills to just, do the basic minimum to support himself. So I feel like maybe not necessarily like book smart, but I feel like he would have to be able to blend in and pick things up quickly. And that's just something that
I love that.
I personally believe, because I'm like, what else would he have been doing all those years, other than there's some darker theories of how he spent that time during the 80s. But if he had to support himself, I kind of think, maybe he's easy at picking up new skills or things like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that.
For sure. Well, and I do kind of wonder if maybe like the intelligence thing kind of, how like in fanon sometimes people will like pick up on one aspect of something and it just blows up, like for instance Lupin's love of chocolate. So like during Snape's worst memory, when he's reading his book, I do kind of wonder if maybe they're like, oh well, he's obviously a nerd because he's like sitting there reading a book while like other people are enjoying themselves outside or whatever. But as my own headcanon, I do feel like a lot of the times we see him like basically sick or like not feeling well around the full moon and kind of like physically weak. So I don't really know like what else he would be doing besides like escaping into books. And you kind of like draw naturally like intelligence equals books, even if it's like fiction or whatever. So for me personally, I think that's where that comes from.
Or like all that time spent in the hospital recovering. He needs something to read.
Yeah, he needs something to do. Yeah.
And I think, rather than going down the intelligence path with that, like looking at how like he's kind of got like a chronic illness that causes him to be a lot more introspective and escapist than his, Marauder friends, and that kind of like giving him a way that he relates more to Snape.
Right? Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Oh, that's good. Okay, the next one I have listed is darkness and self-loathing, which are kind of two different things, but they both have darkness kind of in different ways, I guess.
Yeah, obviously, like Lupin's darkness is kind of seen as something that happens to him, as in like literally the werewolf curse. It's not something he chose, whereas Severus is seen as like choosing a dark path. And you can argue one way or another how much of a choice that is, and also how much of an actual like dark path as in evil that is, an interest in the dark arts and all that sort of thing. It's kind of another subject, but yeah, they both have that side to themselves, and I think that's a really interesting thing to explore between them and individually.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I think they both self-loathing. What's the word I want to use? They hate aspects of themselves.
Yeah, self-consciousness, and both coming from like internally and externally, I feel like.
Right.
They've both sort of been told that they're wrong or bad somehow. Probably, even Remus, even if his parents were loving towards him, which we're not entirely sure about, he's definitely still going to get that impression that there's something wrong with him that needs to be hidden and all that stuff.
Yeah, I feel like they both have a lot of guilt that they carry around, whether it's founded or not.
Yep.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I think also, narratively it's interesting because they do kind of both have this self-hatred, but I think that when Snape looks at Remus, he feels that Remus kind of feels self-righteous, and better, like, oh, I wasn't really like part of the bullying. I stayed back. That makes me a better person. I feel like that's an impression that Snape has. But once that barrier comes down a little bit and they communicate, they see that they actually share this kind of like experience of self-loathing.
Yeah.
As a pairing, I think that brings a very different dynamic to how it's portrayed than, say, a pairing that has one person with like this deep hatred or self-loathing and then another person who doesn't have that. I think it just kind of adds like another layer to like Snupin and other ships like that, because it just connects differently, especially if whoever it is going down the route of like we're kind of both messed up. And they like learn to accept that in a very different light than I think someone who doesn't feel that way brings to the table.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and I think that, if they can see that genuine experience in each other, then they can feel safe to be vulnerable with each other in a way that they can't with anybody else. Because I think when you struggle with like self-hatred, you're kind of afraid to open up and talk about it because, I think people think like, oh, you're doing it for attention, or like, wow, you're really messed up, right? But if they both can see that in each other, then, they can both relax and be themselves in a way that they've never been able to do with anyone else.
Yeah, definitely. That's definitely something I've written about in my fics as well. And then they have the potential to sort of heal each other, which in real life isn't always necessarily the healthiest thing, but I think it's a really fun thing to explore in fic, how they can look at each other and, both of them think that they're more broken than the other one. Like, oh, but you're great. Oh, no, but you're great. And then
broken pieces coming together to make something whole.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Love it.
Very fun to write.
Yeah.
Love it.
Yeah. Okay. This kind of dovetails into how they hide aspects of their true selves, that Lupin is a werewolf and that Snape is working for the light, no matter how gray he appears.
It's like one of those things, again, that's the same and opposite. So Lupin is hiding, his curse, which is something that happened to him, and Snape is hiding something more that he chose, or a path that he went down. And then also it's quite fun because Remus on the outside, his outside sort of persona, his mask is of someone very friendly and personable and mild and all of this stuff. Whereas inside he's got this darkness, this, violent creature. Whereas Snape on the outside, his mask is someone who keeps people away. He's mean, he's nasty, he's cold, aloof, and all of that. Whereas, like, deep down, he's actually quite sensitive and caring.
I think, this is another thing where they both have this experience of having to keep secrets and having to put on this public persona. So I think that's part of the appeal to the ship, is that, even if their relationship is another secret they have to keep, it's something for themselves. It's kind of a place that they can take the mask off and have a break from this public show of the role that they're supposed to be playing.
Yeah, definitely.
Mhm.
Absolutely.
Hey, they both meet tragic ends in canon.
Yeah.
No, let's not talk about that.
Didn't happen.
Well,
No.
they're almost ends, not
Yeah,
actual.
they're fake. They're
They
fake.
run off and they live together in a cottage and have children.
Yes.
Yeah, I think that if we're going with canon, there is this element of self-sacrifice. I think both of them carry like a lot of sense of obligation along with them and responsibility for, in Snape's case, his previous actions. And I think in Lupin's case, his former inaction, I guess, and not being involved. And he finally finds the courage and motivation to fight. And it's just kind of sad that, when that happens, he leaves his, I think 3-week-old child behind and then goes and dies. It's just awful. But yeah, I think both of them feel this kind of sense like this is the culminating moment, like what their whole lives have been working towards. And then, yeah, that's kind of, they've fulfilled their purpose in a way.
And I think they feel that way about it too. I think even with Remus leaving behind a child, I think both Remus and Severus kind of feel like, I'm such a broken person that the best thing I can do for the world is sacrifice my life.
Oh, God.
Yeah.
Oh, no.
I know. It's
That one's
sad.
really well said.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
No,
That's awful.
I agree completely. And they're both actually, they're not just tragic at the end as well. They're like repeated tragedies throughout both of their lives. Yeah.
So true. Yeah. How about their chemistry? How they mesh as people with their personalities?
That's one of the reasons I love this ship so much, because I feel like there's a huge range. It can be anything from just like very fluffy, cute, getting together, teenage love, all the way up to enemies to lovers, hate sex, violence, unhealthy relationship dynamics. It can literally be anything you want.
And I love that. I love that.
Yeah.
I think a big part of that is that, whether this is fanon or canon, I feel that if it's just circumstances that's, posing them as enemies, that as two people, if they had met under different circumstances, I think they would get along really well. So there's always this like underlying tenderness, I feel, but then all these outside circumstances create this drama and toxicity and all of this stuff, which is fun.
Yeah, I completely agree with all of that.
And how they are opposites, how they play off of each other's differences.
Yeah, I think they've got just the right balance of differences and similarities to make for, loads of, there's, as you said, like lots of different possibilities in terms of their relationship, but also lots of complexity in their relationship. Like, it's never going to be boring.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I'm still stuck on the idea that they're like kind of like a dark Molly and Arthur. I'm obsessed with that now, so thank you.
Oh gosh.
Yeah.
Can they also have 7 children?
Oh, definitely. They definitely have to have loads of children.
Okay, let's talk about some common tropes in the Snupin fics. I started with fix it because, the way canon ended just doesn't cut it.
Yeah.
So they need to fix it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, as Masao said, that it's kind of circumstances that keep them apart in a way. And so that's really great fodder for fix it. Obviously, you only maybe need to change a couple of things in order to sort of bring them together, and then they can kind of, once they get together and they're working together, then they can change things for other people as well. So, for example, Severitis, like we talked about.
Yes.
For sure. I also think, the prank, again, going back to that, is a great jumping off point for Fix It Fix, because for me personally, I really don't see how anyone could kind of just continue on with the same friends that they've had and not be like changed by that.
Right.
So by like fixing that, for me, is like one of my big loves, to kind of go from there into like Snupin. So
Well, and I think one thing I've seen in regards to like kind of an added element to make that into a catalyst is that Remus seeing Snape for the first time while he's in werewolf form, he realizes that he's his mate, which is another trope.
Yeah.
And now it's like he has this thing where he feels loyalty kind of biologically to Snape, and that kind of forces him to examine his friendships a little more.
Yeah, that's a great trope. And the can I swear?
Absolutely.
The fuck or die trope.
Yes.
Yes.
Gosh.
There have been some really good ones for this ship.
Yeah.
Very much so, yeah.
Definitely.
Right. Hurt comfort.
Oh, yes.
Bread and butter.
That's one of my favorites to write.
Yeah.
It's my favorite for Severus in general. Like, yeah.
Yeah.
True.
It's like, you just, especially for Severus, you really just want someone to like give him the love that he deserves, and like the caring and nurturing that he never got, like, ever.
Right.
So, yeah, and I feel like Remus is a really good person for that, because he knows what it is to hurt too. So yeah.
Well, and the other way around too. I mean, I love Fix, where Remus he's just gone through his transformation. He's in so much pain, and he is so used to just having to suffer through that alone. And now here's Snape like nursing him and taking care of him.
Oh, yeah. And especially because that's something that is not something that you would think Snape would do, like, on the surface. So yeah.
Like, he's got a sour expression on the whole time, but he's like rubbing on salves and like spoon feeding his cloth and everything like that. He's like, I'm not doing this because I like you or anything. He's like real tsundere about it, right? Like,
yeah. I think The Long Road by Sinister Me really does that super well with Snape, like comforting Remus, and then later you get Remus comforting Snape too, so you get the best of both worlds. But I think the way that they portrayed Snape doing that, it was like so perfect.
Yeah, I agree. I love that fic so much.
I think that's probably my favorite.
Yeah.
I absolutely love it. And it's so heavy and dark, and it's perfect. So you get the perfect amount of darkness mixed in with all of the recovery.
Yeah.
Really well done.
And Snape being cute with Teddy.
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
yes.
And a kind of side helping of almost Drarry.
Right.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Almost.
Yeah, it happens quite a bit, actually, doesn't it?
Yes.
Okay. Enemies to lovers.
Yeah, I love this, of course. Like, and I think my favorite point in time for this to kind of get started is in 93, when Snape is just, he's minding his own business. He's like, please let Dumbledore not hire somebody who's going to irritate the hell out of me this year. And then it's like Remus shows up. He's like, oh my God, again with this. Tired. He just wants a normal year. And now here's this man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and I think that is even kind of very interesting when it starts there in 93, because, Remus is kind of like brought low at this point. And, he like shows up in like these tatty clothing and just like not having a good time of it. And like, I feel like, you could see Snape having some like, yes, he got what he deserved kind of thing. And then kind of come around to, oh, wait a minute. There might be something more here than I expected.
Because it's the first time, well, unless you consider that there might be some like serious interaction in the 80s, like putting that aside, it might be the first time that they're interacting without any of the Marauders there that they know of.
True.
Yeah, for sure.
One-on-one now. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Now there's space for this tension to develop into something.
Yeah.
Right.
Exactly.
The author Bunny Bopper has a couple of really good fics set in that school year, and there's a great sort of enemies to lovers one where Snape spikes Lupin's wolfsbane with the truth serum.
Oh, yeah.
boy.
I love that one. It is so good.
Yeah.
Cue lots of kinky stuff.
Oh
Yep.
boy.
Gosh, there's so much.
Yeah.
Yeah. Secret relationship.
Oh yeah, I love that. Whether it's like later or it's like them being teenagers and hiding their relationship from the Marauders. And I love that. Like Snary is my OTP, but my boyfriend always teases me that Snupin is the better ship because that they can be childhood
New boyfriend. No, just kidding.
Yeah.
Marry him. He's a better one.
Well, right now he's doing a Snary roleplay with me, so we forgive him.
Yeah, he can stay.
But I think that he loves the idea of them being like childhood sweethearts, and maybe in sort of like a fix-it way that they can overcome that the Marauders and like break away from that. And like, in fact, my earliest comic that I posted online was a Snupin comic that I made with him where they're childhood sweethearts.
Oh, lovely.
It's
Good.
terrible. Never look it up, please.
Oh, no, you have to show us.
No, you have to say right after this.
Well, the title is Snupin Burrito, so.
Oh my god.
Good.
I think there might be a link to it from your interview.
Okay. Well, I mean, everybody can go back and see my cursed art from like 20 years ago.
Sorry.
Oh no, it's fine.
Yeah, I will never show anyone the first fanfic I wrote when I was 15 years old. So don't worry.
I think, but really, like, jokes aside, I think, it feels great when you can look back on your older work and be like, this is terrible, because it means, you've grown a lot.
Yeah.
True.
So I'm not ashamed of my horrible comic. I stand by it. Feel free to look at it.
Good for you.
I kind of like it.
I mean, you know what? I still feel really attached to the story. It was so Lifetime movie, so dramatic and ridiculous, and I love it. So
yeah,
I still love that kind of story, especially with Snupin.
Well, it's great for that, isn't it? Snupin, like,
yeah.
As we said earlier, it can be really angsty, but it can also be just so beautifully fluffy and comforting and all those lovely things.
Well, and just like there are so many like dramatic things you can do. Like I mentioned, Sirius and Remus in a relationship, and then there's infidelity with Snape and all kinds of good juicy stuff.
Yeah. Okay, the next one is werewolfery. Did I say that right?
Yeah.
Okay. This could be the prank gone wrong, where Snape gets turned.
Mm-hmm.
I'm so into that. I'm also into the idea that, like, okay, I'm sorry, I know I'm talking a lot, but one of my favorite ideas, and maybe there's a fic like this, but I'd love to write one, is where, like, for whatever reason, Snape has to get an animagus form. Like, maybe he needs it for the war or whatever, and he doesn't know what it's going to be, and he's working on it, and then he achieves it, and it's just, like, the cutest little black wolf. And when he's in that form and like Remus sees it, he's like, oh man,
I'm in love.
Funny.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the whole werewolf stuff is a whole other thing, isn't it? Like, you can't. It's a massive part of Remus Lupin, and there's so much stuff.
Wink, wink.
Of course, all the, there are so many fics where like Snape turns out to be like his mate or whatever. I love that.
Yeah, I love all those. Yeah, I've actually found it quite difficult to find. Things like that aren't always tagged, so it's quite difficult to search for. Like I've put in like mating and bonding and stuff, and
Right.
yeah, you don't really get much coming up, but yeah, there is stuff out there, and
There's a unfinished one called He's My Mate, which I wish it had been finished. And I don't remember who it's by, but it was so good. Just like the tension of it.
Is that different from the Omegaverse?
Some of the ones that I've read have been in that direction, but some of them have just been like, he's a werewolf, so this is like a werewolf specific kind of thing.
like mating for life type.
Yeah, mating for
Yeah.
life. And I think there are many cases where Remus is affected and he goes into a rut or whatever, but Snape is just a normal human, so he's like, whoa, what's this all about?
Right.
Guess
Or
I'm
like,
along
yeah.
for the ride.
Yeah.
Or like that thing where they're like around the full moon, he gets not like super horny and he's just like, oh my God, I want to like do it all the time. And Snape is like, oh my God, fine, let's do it again. Like,
Well, I mean, okay, and Snape is saying like, ugh, fine, but he's really like, oh man, this is
Yeah.
this is great.
like the moon should come around more often. Like,
Yeah, there's a couple. Again, I think You Will Not Kiss Me, and another one I read that I can't remember the title of, where Snape actually kind of provokes Remus when he's in that state in order to kind of seduce him.
Mm-hmm.
Love
Then
that.
gets more than he
Yes.
bargained for.
Uh-huh.
Well, and the whole idea that around, the time of the full moon, normally Remus is like a gentle, almost too gentle lover, but then it's getting close to the full moon and he's like biting and
Yeah.
he's like really
Yeah.
dominate. And Snape's just like,
Yes.
where's this guy the rest of the month?
Yeah, exactly.
The beast comes out.
Yeah.
And then he spends the next 2 weeks repenting and trying to
Uh-huh.
apologize for behavior. And Snape's just like, no, seriously? Like, I liked all of this when he's just
Yeah.
like looking at his body covered in like bite marks and scratches and all
Yes,
things. And the self-hatred comes into play. And it's just, oh my gosh, so funny.
exactly.
But yeah, definitely Snape could be into a bit of that sort of like masochism, I think, on, you
Mhm.
know.
Uh-huh.
It's almost hard to believe that he wouldn't be.
Yeah.
Yes.
Another trope is vampire and werewolf, where Snape is the vampire and obviously Remus is the werewolf.
Huh.
Yeah.
Cat and dog.
Gertrude, you want to talk about your story? It's so good.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you. And
So good.
I also have to take the opportunity to thank Nocturn for her amazing beating that she's been doing on this current fic, because yeah, I wouldn't be here without it.
It is such a treat to be able to read it ahead of time. I will say that.
You got the inside scoop. Yeah, I mean, I've read a few vampire werewolf fics and loved them, and then this, like it does, the plot bunny starts to roll. So yeah, it's called The Book of the Sun and the Moon. So there's a whole other sort of element that is related to the vampire werewolf thing, but also another thing in itself, which we'll get to in a few more chapters' time. But yeah, it also starts at the prank on that night. And slight spoiler, but it happens in the first chapter. Basically, Snape, there's a vampire there as well, and she gives Snape the option to choose to become a vampire instead of getting mauled by a werewolf, essentially.
Hmm.
And in my own sort of made up lore, there is kind of, well, it's not completely mine because there are other fics that use it, but there's kind of a draw, an attraction between vampires and werewolves, and therefore Snape and Lupin are drawn together by the nature of their own personal curses. And then so obviously they're also pulled apart by various things. And so begins 2 decades worth of back and forth, essentially.
Oh, interesting.
That sounds super compelling.
It's been so good so far.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Thank you.
And I love how it sort of follows along with canon, but there's some really important differences too. But
Yeah.
yeah, really well done.
Yeah, and it skips sort of through time as well. So we talked about the 70s and the 90s, and it basically takes place, most of the story takes place between that 75 to 76 school year and then the 93 to 94 school year. And it's not necessarily in order. So it sort of skips about back and forth.
That sounds really fun.
But there's some really great vampire werewolf fics, and I have to mention The Awakening, which is a whole series which is linked in the document, and that's kind of a underworld, I would say, if you've seen those movies.
Oh yeah.
Oh, okay.
Kind of like that, with a lot of action and guns and shit. So that's a really good one.
Have we said enough about Omegaverse?
No.
Oh, darn it.
So I have to say, I love the notes in the doc that's literally like, Omegaverse? Anybody? Yes. Everybody.
Yeah, I added that yes on there.
I have to admit, that is my one squick.
I mean, I'm on the fence about it because like I love Impreg, but you know, sometimes I just prefer it with like without the dynamics of Omegaverse, but then every once in a while I'll get like sucked into a fic.
Yeah. I mean, it's definitely a specific flavor because you get
Right.
into like the dubious nature of, you know, instincts taking over and not being able to make your own choices because of your gender thing and stuff like that. So there's definitely a lot of reasons why I can see that people have a hard time with it. But also then there's times that I'm just like, yes, I just want that, like, you know, obviously Alpha and Omega, it's going to happen whether they fight it or not. So, and it's amazing.
I think the barrier for me is actually, because I'm into all of that, I think the barrier for me is that it's such a different setting and you kind of have to like shift your mindset to be like, okay, we're in this kind of world right now.
Right.
It's kind of like an AU of its own.
Yeah, because it affects everybody. You know, yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah, I think that's my barrier as well with it. I've liked several, but on the whole, I'm kind of like, yeah, I can take it or leave it. It's fine.
Well, and I think with Snupin specifically, you can have those dynamics without it sort of being reflected by the rest of the world because Remus is a werewolf.
Yeah.
Mhm.
That's a really good point. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, you don't necessarily need the whole Omegaverse stuff going on.
Well, and
Mhm.
it's the magical world too, so there's no reason that you can't have like impreg just be a thing, either through potions or just like, well,
Mhm.
wizard biology is different, so
Right.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly.
Yeah.
As is werewolf biology.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can take a lot of liberties.
Hmm.
Yeah, I'm not like, I wouldn't say I'm into Omegaverse stuff. I've certainly kind of avoided it in the past, but I have started to read a few things and
Uh-huh.
I can enjoy it with Snupin and other like male pairings because you're taking away that kind of misogynistic dynamic. Like that doesn't exist basically when you've just got two guys. It's more equitable and therefore it's easier and sort of safer to play around with those like power dynamics and stuff.
Hmm.
Mhm.
For me, definitely Omegaverse for, you know, just in regular like webtoons, you know, stuff like that. Like that was definitely my gateway into reading more of the like werewolf fan fiction and stuff like that. So it's like it definitely led me to why I love like Remus or even like the Animega stuff or, you know, things like that. So
Mhm.
yeah, it was
Yeah.
just one of those things like oh.
Well, and there have been Omegaverse fics that I have really enjoyed, and I do think that the ones that I have enjoyed have maybe played down the society element a little bit. Well, and I understand the like aversion to the misogyny, but like I'm gay, so I'm reading male fics all the time, so I wasn't even considering that. But that's a good point.
Yeah, I think that's a lot of the reason that some women like me are drawn to like the male pairings in general.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
But we
Yeah.
should also mention just on the Omegaverse thing that a new fic has just come out that's a literally tagged Omegaverse, and it's
Ooh.
a Puvilla.
Oh, I
I
love
can't
their
remember
stuff.
I'm not
Yes.
sure how to pronounce, but yeah, they're a really good author, and I can't remember. I think I've linked it in the document.
I'm definitely going to have to check out all the links in the documents because,
Yeah.
well, I've been studying for like a language proficiency test for a couple of weeks now. So I haven't been like having as much of a chance to read fan fiction, but I think I might need to take like a week and go through these.
Yeah, there's a lot of good ones.
Yeah,
Mhm.
it looks like it's Capnolania is the title.
What's the title?
Capnolania.
Oh yeah, no, that's a different one.
Oh.
Yeah, from the same author. That's
Okay.
the smoking one.
Yeah.
It's that author. So if you go to that author, and then yeah, it'll be there.
Hmm. Yeah, I'm all about smoking for some reason with Severus.
Yeah, that is a really, really lovely one, actually. And if not everyone finds smoking sexy, but
Mhm.
that fic definitely emphasizes on the sexiness of smoking.
Okay, let's talk a little bit about the female characters. Lily is sometimes not necessarily paired with Snape and Lupin, but is sometimes a helper, I guess.
Yeah, I've definitely seen like situations where she's actually kind of the mediator almost during their school years to like, create a place like if they're studying together or whatever where they can interact without the pressure of the Marauders, end up being friends and then end up being more than friends. And she's sort of helping them along. And I really do like that trope.
Yeah, me too.
Me three.
I love that dynamic.
Mm-hmm. Like they start out as kind of like a trio of friends, and then it's like, huh,
Oh, yeah.
two of them get together.
Mhm.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Let's also talk about Tonks, who unfortunately gets a lot of hate,
Hmm.
Mm.
but that's mostly Wolfstar fans, I think, hate on her.
I've definitely like I have a favorite Snupin fic that I don't want to say unfortunately because my stance is always that like if you cast a character as a villain in your fic, that doesn't mean that you're bashing them or hating on them. Sorry,
Right.
my dog is barking for some reason. She knows I'm talking about werewolves, and she's like, I'm a dog. But yeah, like I feel that you can write a character as kind of like a romantic antagonist or kind of a villain without bashing on them. But I will say that one of my favorite Snupin fics is Of Mutual Benefit, and
Mhm.
Tonks definitely plays the embittered ex in this story who doesn't want Remus until like she can't have him because he's with somebody else, that kind of vibe.
Right.
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
And is kind of like disgusted with the idea of Snape being able to have the man that like she wanted because like, well, he's not as good as me or whatever. But I think that's maybe the only time I've encountered a fic that kind of casts Tonks as like the rival or like an antagonist in Snupin.
I've seen one as well. I think again it was in You Will Not Kiss Me, I think, where if I'm remembering it rightly, she like actively sort of drugs Lupin or
Oh boy.
something with like maybe a love
Ooh.
potion or something.
Oh, goodness.
Yeah, and this is like after Snape and Lupin are together, and he
Oh,
kind of
wow.
leaves Snape for her or something. I think it's a bit more complicated than that.
Oh
But
Very
boy.
yeah,
dramatic.
yeah, she's really sort of cast as pretty much a real bad guy in that one. But yeah, it is quite rare, I think.
I think more commonly, like I think about another that I talked about in another episode called Stitch and Bitch.
Mm.
Oh,
Mhm.
Remus has Teddy, and it's one of these situations where, Remus just happens to survive the war and Tonks didn't. And he goes into the relationship dynamic a little bit that, like, he's not really interested in her, but because they were both in kind of a vulnerable place due to everything happening with the war, they end up sleeping together. And then, like, he kind of marries her out of a sensible obligation. And, like, it turns into, like, we don't feel that way about each other, but we're we're having this child together and we have like a friendship and we respect each other. And I think that's like far more common in Snupin fics where Tonks is even in the picture. I think more often than not, she's just kind of like not like.
Yeah, she's just not mentioned at all most of the
Right,
time.
right.
Yeah. I do love when like Tonks is there and like in a positive light.
Mm-hmm.
I think that Tonks is like a really cool character, but I think it's even more interesting when that happens, where like she is there and it's like in a different realm basically as to like what happens in canon. So I think that's
Mhm.
I think that can add like an interesting dynamic to fics.
Yeah, and I think, you know, if Teddy's there, like the dynamic of Snape being like a step parent is fun.
Mhm.
Yeah.
For sure.
Or Tonks the surrogate. That's what I.
Yeah, there you go.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Okay, yeah.
Mhm.
I think when I was saying she gets a lot of hate, it's more in the way that Snape gets a lot of hate. Is
Right.
not necessarily in
Yeah.
fic, but those idiots that just have to hate on people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. Oh, for sure.
And you know, she's a rival for Sirius in
Mhm.
their eyes.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Anyway.
Well, and you know, I don't understand, like, I understand not liking a character, but I don't understand spending your precious, valuable time posting about how much you hate a character or whatever.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think that's
Sure.
why it's so important to me that it's just like, you know, it's perfectly fun and fine to portray a character as a villain or an antagonist in your fic, but like, you know, it's a total waste of time to just be like, I hate this character so much, I'm gonna post about it with all my friends.
Yeah.
Come on. Like,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Get that
Yeah.
catharsis into your
Mhm.
work. That's just get that
Mhm.
out.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and sometimes
Yeah.
for me, like, I'll just write a character as a villain because I'm like, well, this would be fun. Like, I don't even hate the
Yeah.
character, right?
Sure.
Like,
Oh,
Uh-huh.
yeah.
Mhm.
Absolutely. I've done that. I
Yeah.
think as a multi-shipper too.
yes,
Sometimes somebody's just going to be a villain and then the next they're going to
Mhm.
be the protagonist. And
exactly.
you just you never know.
Exactly.
Mhm.
Yeah, everyone who is like has their, I mean, a lot of people have their OTP, but then people who are like exclusively one ship, it's easy to like fall into this character is a threat to my ship.
Right.
And then they
Mhm.
just, demonize them regardless of, using them for some other purpose. Like Ginny gets a
Right.
terrible rep when
Right.
it comes to like Drary and stuff like that, when you're
Mhm.
just like, Ginny is really cool. Like she
Yeah.
doesn't deserve that. Like she and Luna are amazing together. Like
Exactly. Well, that's my like
Yeah.
thought as like a Snary shipper, because back in the day, you know, that was a lot more common. Just the kind of like, well, let's take this female character who gets in the way of my ship and make her the bad guy
Yeah.
and rah.
Yeah. Oh,
But I
gosh.
like, you know, when you have Snary or Harry's with somebody else, make Jenny like cool and get her together with
Right.
Luna. Like, that's awesome.
Yeah. It's a supportive bestie.
Yeah.
Like, come on. Like,
Right.
it's
Mhm.
oh yeah, there's plenty of works that I've read, like older ones, especially when I was more specific in like Dreary Snary, where you're just like, I almost cringe at the bashing level that people will go to. That I'm just like, no, she wouldn't act like that. Or just making all the female characters who might be against the ship, like just totally making them to be these absurd people. I'm just like, oh God, I can't finish this. I'm like, I just can't do it. I have too much love for everybody. This is not going to work for me.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I don't understand the sort of need to do that because, yeah, like you say, you can write the fic without kind of demonizing,
Mhm.
Right.
even if you do make them a bad guy. But that idea that the canon ship is a threat somehow
Mhm.
Yeah.
to-
Yeah.
Yes,
is
exactly.
just weird. Like,
is.
you can just write it differently.
Just give them another partner or like just make them just not interested or platonic.
Not everyone can be as enlightened as we are. I mean,
Yeah.
not everyone can have a more stress-free, positive existence than we have.
Uh-huh.
Like, I do think it's a maturity thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You feel like you have to own the shippers who go against your pairing or whatever, and it's just like
Yeah.
I have been too old for that since I was 11, so no thank you.
I think Tonks and Fleur is quite a common pairing, isn't it? In the
Oh, I
Lupin
love Tonks and Fleur.
Huh.
Yes.
I love them together.
I actually put Tonks with Bill.
Yes.
I quite like that. Yeah, I like that.
She likes the wolfy guys. What you gonna do, you know?
Yeah.
And actually, he's a lot more sort of appropriate for
Yes.
her, and they have
Yes.
more in common.
Yeah.
Molly Weasley would approve.
Yeah. She's working on, you know? It's like, yeah.
Okay. Another thing is severitis.
Yes.
Yeah.
Snape is either the mentor or the actual father of Harry.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
I have read one where he was his mother.
Oh, okay.
That was
Interesting.
Snupin. And this
Okay.
is like deep in the recesses of a fic I read a long ass time ago.
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
But the whole plot emerges because it's 1993 and Remus finds out this like closely guarded secret or whatever that Harry is actually James and Snape's.
Oh.
Oh.
Here for it. I need
I
this fic.
really wish I remembered this, but it's one of those things that I read and it's stuck in my mind and lives there rent free now.
Oh God, I love Snape so much.
Yeah, that sounds really good.
Mm-hmm.
But I do, like, as I said, I love Snape and Remus adopting Harry, and in a weird way, like this is like the best possible home life situation for Harry to have. I feel
Yeah,
like.
it's the ultimate.
Yeah, I still love the comparison between Molly and Arthur of being like, Lupin's there to be the dad who's like, just let your mom have her moment. It'll be okay, sort of thing. Like, or behind the scenes goes to Harry's room in the middle of the night, like, how she gets, or whatever.
Well, and
So, yeah.
not to undermine Molly and Arthur actually like treating Harry kind of like one of their own.
Yeah.
But I think that with Remus and Snape, it's like he's their only child. So he
Yeah.
actually
Mhm.
like gets that special relationship, and he doesn't feel like he's competing with biological children or whatever.
And they both have that strong emotional connection to his, like, if it's an adopted situation, like to his actual birth parents, like
Yeah.
Everest to Lily and then Remus to James. So the fact that they could give him really deep, unconditional love, even if it's in their own unique ways, is wonderful. Like, I mean, I just love Severitis in general, but to see him with, a partner raising Harry is great.
A partner who is just as invested in Harry.
Yeah.
too.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Mhm.
Yeah, not like, I don't know. I'm now trying to think of a random
A
thing.
random dude, like
It is I still feel early, even though it's been 2 hours. But
guy that Snape met behind the Tesco.
Oh, Cornelius Fudge. There we
Oh,
go.
yeah.
There is a fic of
Is that
That
who
is
railed him?
absolutely my
There's a
favorite
fic of
thing.
it based on a Tumblr post that I made. So
Oh,
That was your
Nice.
Tumblr
Oh,
post
is
in the
that you?
beginning? That's so
Yes.
exciting. That is one of my favorite kind of like little fandom microcultures.
I mean, when I made the post, I was like goofing around, and then somebody wrote two people wrote like actual fics about it, and it was incredible because the setup for the post was like, what are the other two memories that Snape didn't want anyone to see? And like one was
Yes.
him accidentally calling Minerva mom, and the
Yes.
other was him getting raw dogged behind a Tesco. And like one fic was very silly of him behind the Tesco, and then one was like this profound fic about his relationship with Minerva, and I was like, damn, y'all are incredible.
Man.
Oh, wow.
I love that.
So now we know who to blame for that.
Yes.
Yeah.
That wonderful trope.
Who
I
does
love it.
think?
Yeah. Okay, well, on the outline, I go to Snupin art next, but I'm wondering if we should go to Fix next because it's more of a natural.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
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 And
then come
unfortunately,
back.
I have an appointment like that. I have to get going now, so I'll
Oh,
have to
sure.
say goodbye now before you guys dive into your stuff. But I can't wait to hear about all the fic that I need to read. So it's so
Okay.
great.
Well, thanks for joining us, Meg.
Yeah,
Yeah,
this
it's really
was so
great
much
having
fun.
you.
Glad to be
Yeah.
back. It's always nice to be able to join in on these for sure, even if I had tired brain today. So, but definitely
Sorry.
love these two.
Hope-
And thank you so much for having me.
You bet. Have a great day.
You too. Bye.
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 Okay. So, yeah, I'd like to have Nocturne and Gertrude talk about their own fics to start with.
Okay, yeah. So I have a few. I've got a couple of Drabble series. I think my favorite one that I've written for them and the longest one is called Tactical Molecular Friction. And it has some awesome art by SafePlaceSnupin that they made that I still look at sometimes and it just like makes me happy. But the premise of that one is it's set during book 5 times, and Snape decides that he's going to teach Remus how to brew the Wolfsbane potion himself. And so they kind of set up shop in one of the rooms in Grimmauld Place, and that's kind of just how the general setup is. And it was very fun to write. I think in the background there's a little dialogue segments with Sirius and Creature that were really fun. And throughout the whole time, Remus is sort of just living at Grimmauld, mooching off of Sirius and feeling guilty. And he's been trying to fix up the place and has some home improvement DIY projects going on in the background. So that one was just a fun one to explore, I think, in part because I feel like in other ships with Snape, there's always that one where he's teaching somebody something about brewing. So I was like, let's do that and make it Snupin. And that was my November Nano project from last year. So I was actually proud that I even was able to finish it.
Nice. It sounds really fun.
Yeah, that's really good. I really enjoyed that fic.
Yeah.
The premise is brilliant. And I mean, we spoke a little bit about Wolfsbane, but yeah, it's a really, really nice thing to explore with the dynamic between Snape and Lupin revolving literally around that sort of steaming cauldron.
I'm sorry, I was just looking at some of your. It looks like you actually, well, Dark as the New Moon is also one of yours. Do you want to say something about that?
Sure, yeah. So Dark as the New Moon is a post-war sort of healing, hurt, comfort, recovery story. And I think that this was written kind of at a time where there were a couple of others. Gertrude actually wrote one called Careful of the Stitches, and SafePlaceSnupin also made some art.
Yeah.
There's just a little, I don't know if it was circulating on Tumblr. I'm not on Tumblr, but where there's just this idea of the two of them sharing a hospital room immediately after the battle and recovering together.
Oh, nice.
But yeah, that one was written for, I think, the Remus Lupin Fest. Someone prompted it. And so the premise is that they're sharing this hospital room and Snape is unable to speak and Remus is blind. And they have to find new ways to communicate and kind of heal together.
Yeah, so good.
That sounds great.
Yeah, I thought it was handled so well.
There's so many fics that I'm going to have to read after this.
Oh, I know.
And then, yeah, I have a couple others that I linked, but I feel like crackfic is one of my favorite things to read and write, depending on my mood. And I actually have a couple that are, one of them is like definitely a crackfic. That's the one that's like former headmaster is the title, where they're both portraits after the war. And that
I see.
That was prompted by Myth, who is on our server and also a really great writer for the pair. But that one was really fun. It's literally just them like running around in the portraits, getting drunk and like pulling pranks and things. And then my other one, A Step in the Right Direction, is kind of similar humor. That was inspired by another kind of sillier fic that I read when I got back into the fandom. But I think that genre is just really fun with both of them because everything we talked about so far has been so serious. It's very dark. They have all these secrets and angst. And here they are just, you know, as portraits, living their best life.
That sounds great. Okay, Gertrude, you want to talk about your fics?
Okay, yeah. Well, the first Snupin that I wrote is called Artemisia Absinthium. And it started off with I think again, it was like a little Tumblr prompt or idea or whatever. What if Snape discovered that Peter Pettigrew had turned traitor before Lily and James were killed? So yeah, he, well, I won't spoil it too much, but yeah. Shenanigans ensue. Lots of Snape being a sneaky spy in that one, and a little bit of cute Snape and Harry, and one quite steamy Snape and Lupin moment. In the first part, it became a whole series because of course, I couldn't just write one. It just grew into this massive epic, like basically original story. Yeah, so part two is where it sort of really gets into the Snupin stuff and Bellatrix being Bellatrix and all sorts of other stuff. And then I wrote a short little one, which is a platonic Snupin, actually, called Monsters. It's just a little one shot of like, what if Remus actually did attack and kill someone on one of these nightly excursions, and he goes to Snape because Snape is the only other person who knows he's a werewolf, but because they have like animosity between them, he kind of feels like he maybe he wants Snape to sort of punish him or something. But yeah, so that's just a short little one. And then Careful of the Stitches that Nocturne mentioned. Yeah, good old, what I call a good old hospital Snupin. There was only one room as opposed to there was only one bed sort of thing.
Good.
But it sort of has a sort of dark start to it in a way, because they're kind of so it's post-war, and they're both sort of shoved in this side room that's kind of being used for storage because one of them's werewolf and the other one's a Death Eater, and everyone's just like, just leave them there to die sort of thing.
Oh,
And they have to help each other and then obviously fall for each other because it's Snupin.
Absolutely.
One of my faves.
That sounds really good.
I think that was inspired by SafePlaceSnupin's drawing that Nocturne mentioned on Tumblr.
Yeah. I was so like shocked when all of that happened because it was just like a quick sketch kind of situation that I did for Lyra, and it just like went so many different places. That was so cool to like experience.
Yeah, it just had so much sort of character, sometimes as well sketches, because it's like not a complete work in quotation marks. Again, it's sort of quite inspiring. Just you kind of get a little snippet and then, yeah.
Yeah, it makes you want to explore it more.
Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
And then my other fic, I've already spoken about, The Book of the Sun and the Moon, and that's, ongoing. It's very, very nearly complete. I still am tangling with the last few chapters, but yeah, it definitely will be completed, and I'm sort of updating that about twice a week at the moment.
Okay, we do have quite an extensive list of fics by other authors. Okay, can whoever put them up maybe want to give a quick talk about them?
I think Gertrude and I both have recommended some of Bunny Bopper's stories, but I think those are, any of them have kind of a really nice range. A lot of them kind of take place during book 5 or book 3, sort of with more adult characters. But there's also one called Creature Comforts. I'm not sure if I've linked. That's Marauders era. That is honestly just like so sweet and heartwarming. And it's one of the ones that I go back to just when I need a comfort fic. So that one is definitely good. I know we had talked a little bit about The Long Road.
Mm-hmm.
That's, I think, one of the more widespread, like ongoing works in progress. That is after the war, where Lupin is essentially bought as a slave, both he and Teddy, when I think his previous owner dies, and then Snape essentially becomes his master.
He inherits him.
Yeah, he inherits him, yes.
That's right. Yeah.
Him and Teddy both. And the premise is incredibly dark, but I think the dynamics are so well done. It's just this like really gorgeous tale of healing and recovery and growth, and the choices that they both have to make in their situation. That one is really nice.
It's really lovely to read. Like it sort of I feel like I'm being healed as well when I'm reading it.
Yes, exactly that. That one I think is also interesting because it is a post-war fic where the light side wins, but enslaving werewolves is still seen as totally fine. So there's a lot of like political stuff that happens in that one as well, which is pretty cool.
Should I read out my list?
Yeah, go ahead.
So The Awakening I've mentioned, The Werewolf and His Lover, I always recommend this one because it's just so lovely. I don't know if anyone's read it, by Small Brown Frog. The premise is many years ago there was a ghost and a portrait who fell in love. So it's obviously post-war and they're both dead, but they find a way to be together with the assistance of some of the students. It's just, really sweet fic. There Is a Light That Never Goes Out. I really liked because there's kind of a past Severus and Evan Rosier ship in there. Quite interesting to see Snape shipped with like more unusual characters in there, but it's kind of like a previous relationship. And it's sort of him learning to trust again, essentially, with Remus. That's really nice. To Regain Lost Time is like, this is probably as angsty as I get in a way. So it's one where Remus was captured and tortured by Voldemort and is like severely disabled afterwards, and Severus like decides to look after him because he's like always been in love with him, but it's kind of too late because Remus is in this almost sort of comatose state or paralyzed. I can't remember exactly, but also kind of maybe it's not too late, and there's some really lovely moments in there of like Snape being like a full-time carer to Remus, basically. Conspiracy Theory then is just a really fun one. Like, it's basically a rom-com with Dumbledore like being a matchmaker. I think it's kind of like Remus and Severus decide to pretend to go along with him to kind of shut him up, but then obviously actually really fall for each other. It's that kind of thing.
Some fake dating to real dating.
Yeah.
I love that.
And that writer too, I think, is incredible.
Yeah, all of their fics are really good.
Yeah, they have a ton, and a ton from like the early days, from probably 10 or 15 years ago. Just very prolific. And I always go back and find something new when I go back through all of their works.
That's McKay, right?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, their Bungle in the Jungle is an AU that they wrote, where Severus is a temperamental like TV chef, like almost Ramsay-esque, and Remus is his assistant, and they get lost on like they're like traveling to like some tribe out in the jungle, and they get lost together. It's so good.
Yeah, they've got a kind of like house, like Dr. House, Snape as
Yes.
house kind of fic as well, which is really great. They've got a lot of like AUs and post-war fics that are really good. And the next one, And Sometimes Darkness by Undone, which is another disability fic, but this time it's Snape, who is, I can't remember, he's lost his legs or lost the use of his legs, but yeah, he's physically disabled and Remus cares for him. And that's a really nice one. 1000 Galleons by Carla, and obviously we have to talk about Carla a bit because again,
Yes.
so many great fics. Yeah, so 1000 Galleons is basically Remus wants Snape to forgive him for past stuff, and he says, "What's the price of your forgiveness?" And Snape says, 1000 galleons. And obviously for Remus, that's doesn't seem achievable, but yeah, it's really good fun fic.
Sounds good.
You Will Not Kiss Me, I've mentioned a lot of times. It's unfinished, and there is a lot of dark and kinky stuff in there that is not tagged, so proceed with caution. I couldn't read some of it because like the angst was so much.
Oh, wow.
Ooh.
For me, but then, I'm a little bit soft. But it has like so much amazing sort of like original plot stuff in there, and like werewolf lore, and there's this whole werewolf pack that Remus gets involved with that has like so much interesting stuff in there. So it's really, really good aspect. Lay Down Your Armor, Be With Me Forever by Blue Sunday Cake, which is trans Snape.
I love that one so much.
It's one of my favorites.
Yeah, I cannot say enough good things about that fic.
And the writer in general is incredible too.
Yes.
I've read that one. I remember that one being really good.
Yeah, really excellent. Should I keep going? There's so many of them.
Listed so many.
You're almost there, I think.
Don't Let the Light Go Out by Bitter Arm, which is kind of like mentor Severitis, I think.
Mm-hmm.
But also Snape's cover is blown, and I think he gets quite hurt. I can't remember exactly the details, but it's a very good one. Capnolagnia, which is the smoking one. Oh, Planning to Love You is the Omega Verse one that's just come out.
When is that Marauders era?
I don't know. I haven't read it yet.
Oh, it is.
So
yes.
it is.
Oh,
Yeah.
That looks good.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is really good. It's actually very sweet and wholesome for an Omega.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I'm just looking at the description and it's like, the plan is compromised when Remus's friends find out about the relationship. I'm like, oh man, that sounds good.
Yeah, there's a lot of good drama surrounding that, and it's just a very good fic. Yeah.
Nice.
And Have Your Cake and Eat It. Who put those up there?
I probably put that one in. Yeah. So
Okay.
Have Your Cake and Eat It is sort of like a time travel Marauders era story where Remus, it's from his perspective, jumps back in time after the battle, back to his Hogwarts days. And I don't want to spoil the ending, but I thought it was absolutely beautiful. It's one of my favorite Snupin writers who wrote that story and kind of just gives him a second chance at going through everything again, and is just really beautifully written.
Yeah, I really liked that one.
Yeah.
Sounds incredible.
That's one of those fics where I finished it and I had to like sit down and just like, okay, my life has changed now. What do I do?
Yes.
Yeah, it was
Exactly.
so good.
It needs, you need to have some time to marinate and process.
Yeah,
everything.
you really, like you had to like stop and just like think about that one. You're like, damn.
Yeah. And I think some of these are ones that I put on. Trust Fall is one of my favorites. It's a little drabble that Miff wrote, and it's just so sweet. I love it. Marauders era, literally a trust fall exercise between them. I think we talked about Bunny Bopper's stories, which are all incredible, and The Secret Language of Plants by Andrina. That one is an epic series, and that starts out as like Snupin, Severitis, and then kind of turns into like a dreary story as it goes through canon.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That one I've
Love
read.
that one.
That one's a good one.
Yeah, really good.
And then I added a couple at the end. These three at the end that I put there are all sort of like old school from like many years ago. And I love them all. The first one is In Recompense, where there's basically a sort of like dark magic shop that opens up in Nocturn Alley that will give you what you want for a price.
Ooh.
Oh yeah, is really good, that. Yeah.
Yeah, I just love it. That one lives in my head. And it is an established relationship, which I don't always read, but I think it's done really, really well. The next one, Midnight in the Owlery. So there's actually two Snupin fics called Midnight in the Owlery, and they're both really good. But the one I linked is from 2006, and
Wow.
still like one of the most incredible things I read. It's mostly from Remus Lupin's perspective, and it's sort of an epistolary story after the war where they're writing these anonymous letters to each other and sort of figure out who each other are. It's like the most beautiful romantic story I've pretty much ever read. So good. And then the last one, The Voyage of HMS Leviosa, is an AU story where they're on a ship together going to explore some islands and explore like the flora and fauna.
Interesting.
And that one is like diving back into the past. It is so well done. Like it's such a unique setting, but the characterizations still hold really strongly. And it's one of my favorites as well.
I do really like a lot of the old school ones, and sometimes I feel like people feel like they have to like be compliant with the later books. And I like fics like that. Like I like post-war fics, but I also sometimes miss just like the Wild West of not knowing what was going to come in the later books. So people came up with some really creative stuff.
Right.
Absolutely. Yeah, that was definitely fun. And yeah, I think Snupin is one of those ships that it's so easy to just revisit and find these hidden gems from so many years ago. There's stories out there from like 20 years ago that you can just kind of stumble upon. It's like going gem mining. It's so fun.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, let's talk a little bit about art. We have a SafePlaceSnupin here, who's a wonderful artist.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah. So like when I first started drawing Snupin, I was just in agony because they are like two completely like different, at least visually, people when you think of them in terms of, how they're traditionally portrayed. You've got like Snape, who's very like contrasted black and white kind of person with very sharp lines. And then, Lupin is more of like a like warmer colors, softer lines kind of thing. And it took me forever to like figure out how I wanted to draw them. And then like finally, I feel like finally I'm in a good place where I'm consistently drawing them well. But yeah, so but I love sticking them in different scenes. So I guess like the first one there is that plant shop AU, which was for the Remus Lupin Fest of 23. I saw that prompt and I knew I had to do that one.
Yes. That was my prompt.
Yeah. So I was just like, oh my
I
God.
love the art.
Yes, it was such a good prompt. And I just really had this image of the two of them being very sweet about it. And Snape's like got the little like rose between them to like kind of giving it to him, but like not really giving it to him kind of thing. So yeah, I really, really enjoyed that prompt. So that was awesome. And yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But Snupin is actually the first ship or couple that I ever tried to draw like extreme not safe for work for.
Uh-huh.
It wasn't ever really like in my desires to do that. And then I think probably because I just didn't see a lot of it out there for this ship, I was like, I think I have to do this now.
Uh-huh.
So actually, the first one that I linked there, I titled it Inside and Embraced. I think I put only on the Snupin Discord server. There's an animated version.
Oh.
Oh, goodness.
Yes, I did
Yeah.
enjoy the animated version.
Mhm.
Yeah. But that one, I also like to play around, with like Remus and Severus and like who's on top and who's on bottom with those ones. So I think I kind of go 50-50 with them, which I think is believable in either case.
Yeah, that's something we didn't talk about, but I think that's one of the other dynamics of the ship that I like. Just with the lunar cycle, there's a lot of opportunities for kind of shifts in the power dynamics and things like that.
Mhm.
Yeah, I love
Yeah,
that
for
about
sure.
them. Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah, they can both be tops and bottoms.
Yeah,
Mhm.
exactly.
Yeah.
Which is extremely fun. But yeah, just kind of like getting them into positions that feel like would be something that they would do has been an interesting experience.
Positions, you say?
Yeah, positions.
Oh.
Very good for anatomical practice.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
We will have a page of these, assuming, which I think we'll be able to, is to have a, disclaimer, you must be 18 type thing.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So, yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, these are really good and they're just so good together.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I really like as well your more stylized. I haven't seen so many recently, but almost like tarot card style or like woodblock style work that you've done in the past.
Oh, are you referencing the Arts Nouveau one?
Yeah, probably.
Yeah, I really want to do another one like that because that one was very intimidating for me because it is outside of my comfort zone in terms of like stylistic choices. But I got into like an Art Nouveau kick back then, and I was just like really drawing a whole bunch of stuff like that. And I'm feeling myself sliding back into it, so maybe keep an eye out for that.
Yeah, I actually
Yeah.
thought it kind of really suited your style
Aw.
somehow. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, that was one of my like super early Snupins too. I haven't actually been in this ship for very long. I think
Yeah, me
it's
neither.
just been like a little over 2 years maybe.
Oh.
And yeah, so it kind of consumed my life and it's all I think about now. So, and
Fair.
it's been that way for like it like started as like I could see that happening. And then a girl that I role play with had asked me for it and I was like, okay, but I don't know anything about it. And since then, I literally have just have sucked up everything I could find on it. I was just like, oh my God. And it hasn't really stopped. So I don't really see it stopping anytime soon.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Well, that's good. So we need more. I feel like there's not a huge amount of Snupin art, so we definitely need more of it.
We really do.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
Okay. Did you want to talk about any of your other ones?
I'll talk about the curve of his back real quick too, which is another not safe for work one. I would like to talk about that one specifically because Burdened with Pointless Purpose wrote a fic about it. And so it's like linked in there as well. It's a very like I mean, it's like pure smut fic, but it also has a lot of like heart to it. So I would just recommend that one. They named it like the same as what I named it, The Curve of His Back. And it's, basically Severus feeling good in his own skin because of how Remus is like railing him basically. So
Oh hell yeah.
it's super
No, but
super
for real,
good.
that's like a trope that I love where Snape is like being affirmed by just getting absolutely destroyed.
yeah. So if you haven't read that one, then perhaps you should because it's really good.
That's fantastic.
They did a great job about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's see. Yes, and we looked at so much of SafePlaceSnupin's art. We're going to do a separate interview sometime in the near future.
Hell
Yeah, I'm very excited about that. Thank you for asking.
Oh, sure. Okay, and there's reference to a few other Snupin artists.
Yeah, I just added a few that I've found. Yeah, just because there's not enough of them. But yeah, I just tried to add a few of my favorites for people to look at. My favorite at the moment is the second one down, Asikubi Soda.
Oh yes.
Their drawings are so good. I love them. Really, again, kind of a cartoony style. So you get a lot of character in there and sort of little scenes between them that are really sweet. Yeah.
Yeah, they're brilliant.
Yeah.
I was so excited when they came to Tumblr because I had not run into them before. I guess they were more on Twitter, which I don't really go on. But they came to Tumblr recently and have been posting their artwork, and I've just been so impressed with all of them. Like they're so good, and they have such character and heart to them. Like you can really like feel the scenes that they put them in. It's just fantastic.
Yeah. Well, that's great. Yeah, I've enjoyed seeing hers or theirs. Not sure about pronouns, but yeah. And let's see. I think we've covered everything. Thank you, everybody, for hanging on for this jumbo show.
It was absolutely phenomenal.
Yeah, so much fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the Snupin sort of little fandom, it's kind of small but very friendly as far as I've seen. So
Yeah. Definitely am more comfortable than like Meg's referred to. I have had a hard time with Marauders in general, but but I can see this,
I think where they intersect with Snape in like a good way, that's where I feel comfortable. Like the broader Marauders fandom can be a little intimidating and I think I don't want to like generalize, but I think that there is some animosity towards Snape fans coming from some people.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
But I think when you're shipping them with Snape, everybody's happy.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, thank you so much for inviting me on here and letting me talk so much.
Thank you, Gertrude and Nocturne and SafePlaceSnupin and Masao.
Yeah, it was so much fun. Thank you for having me again.
Yes, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Hey, everybody have a good one.
You too.
You too.
You too.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
That was awesome. Thanks again to Gertrude Crow, Nocturne, SafePlaceSnupin, masao, and Megs for their observations and insights. Go to our additional reading page at snapechatpodcast.com for links to our guests' great art and stories. There's also an extensive list of other Snupin fics. And here we must say goodbye. We wish we didn't have to, but it hasn't escaped our notice that life isn't fair. Like us on Facebook, follow us on Tumblr and Twitter, or leave a comment on our website at snapechatpodcast.com. We'd love to hear from you. Many thanks to Nix for her continued work on our website. Support us on Ko-fi to help defray costs of production. That's ko-fi.com. Be sure to check out Care of Magical Shippers podcast at alwayssnape.com. Thanks for listening. Until next time, stay snarky.